Hi everyone. We'll continue with a series of solving this year's PYQs at least on a fundamental level. While I will not be showing you a 1200 word written essay which fits this topic, which we'll release in the Telegram group that we have, Letter in Spirit, but I'll take you through how you have to think your way through this. And make no mistake, it's not trivial, it's not an obvious way, and most of you, even the veterans, would crack at some point, so watch out where you do. This topic was attempted by just 7% of the aspirants this year in a poll which I took in my group. Okay. And as I take you forward with how to unravel this topic, you realize that there were 3 more topics in this year which had a lot of similarities with this. 3 more topics in this year between the section A and section B. Now, as I teach in my program Smash Essay, I teach the task framework. But even before I come to the framework, I teach the first thing, which is unraveling the metaphor, right? So here it's muddy water. Best is a strong word, a strong qualifier. Cleared resolution by leaving it alone. Okay, leaving it alone, right? The most obvious and common in every, the literal translation, which I'm sure 100% of you would agree, is that, just like if there is a beaker with the muddy water, and if you let it settle in, this would come down and the water would be clear. And similarly, there are some situations in life where it's best that if you leave the problem alone and it naturally solves. Okay, that's your thesis. That's the thesis of this topic, as we say. The antithesis is also simple, that sometimes if you leave the problem alone without knowing the context, well, it can spiral out into ways that you probably not even have imagined, right? So a basic level thesis to this question is this. Antithesis is what I just said. And the basic synthesis, as you think, would be that you have to be measured and calibrated in your response. You have to understand the context before you leave the muddy water alone. This is, I hope, simple. Now, people who've been through my lectures on the task framework, the thesis, antithesis, synthesis framework, which kind of helps you see both sides of the coin and then resolve them in a much more mature way. This is a basic given. But let's uncover something which is more fundamental, and which, if you do properly with me here, you'd actually be able to implement that in almost everything that we do. Current affairs, weekly compilation, monthly compilation. You'll be able to see the world in a very different and very mature perspective. And I'll do that in Burning Issue magazine sessions with you, but hold on for a moment and stay with me. Let's see, this is the statement, and the thesis is muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. If we think critically, if we have some kind of a systems thinking, we figure out or try to figure out what are the assumptions here. Assumptions which have to be true so that this thesis stays true, right? One of them would be that, and I'll take the beaker example only, that this is the beaker and I can leave it alone provided there is no one else who's putting mud here, right? If this system is not, if I'm not sure that the system is cordoned off from other things, then, and if other people are putting mud, then this will never resolve. आप कितनी भी देर तक उसको छोड़ते रहो, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. The muddy water will stay muddy, right? Which if I have to, oh God, put it into words, it's like you need to know the systems better. Okay? You need to know if your environment is better or not. Second, I need to be sure that this muddy water has a self-correcting mechanism. I need to be sure that whatever kind of mud has gone in, right, it eventually will settle down. I need to be sure of that there is a self-correcting mechanism. जैसे हम देखते हैं ना कि there's so many recession cycles, depression comes and then the market autocorrects. You might study in economics or you might know it already. Markets have a tendency to autocorrect, right? But sometimes ecological balances, if they are disturbed to such an extent that they go topsy-turvy, they don't autocorrect themselves, right? Then you have to take active measures to correct something. Like you've seen the floods in the Uttarakhand mountains or the Himachal mountains, right? They take things along with them. They don't autocorrect. You have to pay the price then. So you have to be well within your threshold limit of screwing up over there. So these are two assumptions which I take if this is to be true. Third assumption, time frame matters. I leave this muddy water for what, 7 days, month, and then it does the first round of cooling down. And if I still leave it, if I still don't come and look at it, what happens? Does it festers and combines with something else, or there's some auto reaction and it changes into something even more bizarre? Similar situations life mein hoti hain, right? You have social inequalities, you have all sorts of injustices, and sometimes you just let things be, let the temper simmer down. But to what extent? If you do not intervene at the right time, then that festers into a wound, that there is a time which comes when negotiations and dialogues also are not possible. And you can remember so many examples just by thinking through it. 3 things we said. 4th, power asymmetry matters, right? There is a famous example of Cold War that USA and USSR, and there were some checks and balances in the world order also, were able to hold off the eventual escalation because they were neck to neck. The powers were neck to neck. So strong people, they can wait to see who blinks first, or what happens. But we cannot, right? If it's USA versus Vietnam, then it's obvious that USA can just put in the power systems here. And Vietnam needs a very quick rescuing. And it won't happen. And if it doesn't happen, the war will get stretched. And even if USA, and we know what happened with USA and Vietnam, even though Vietnam won, but it suffered a lot of losses. Even though USA had a global meltdown on its action, but both sides suffered, right? So power asymmetry is such an important thing, which has to be of importance if we have to let the muddy water alone. And finally, lastly, intent. Another assumption that we go ahead with is intent. We are assuming that someone who's letting the beaker be is actually intently aware of how things are going about. That not swirling this water or not doing anything about it is actually active restraint. And not passive indifference, right? And it's not passive indifference. Because if it is this, then you're going to see the situation unravel into a monster that you can't even solve for. Now, so these are 5 things. 5 things. 1, for the patience of this kind to work, environment must be stable. There should be no disturbances from outside, no variables, no external agencies influencing this setup. Second, the setup, we have to be sure that it's a naturally self-correcting mechanism. We have to be sure of that. Certain situations in our life, and you would remember examples, cannot naturally solve themselves out. Okay, the status quo might just be maintained. The stagnation would just be there. It will not resolve. And that's not what we want. Then it's better to act. Then the statement will not hold ground. Third, time frame matters. You need a quick resolution, or you're okay with a long stretched thing, right? I'll give you an example. Most of us, we know, right, that Rajputs and in some other, most of the kingdoms, Marathas in the south, in the Maharashtra, they were able to hold off the invaders because their forts were fortified and they had all the supplies, and also the terrain was very non-navigable, not that easily to navigate, right? These were the assumptions why if someone was coming up and putting in siege, right, whatever, they were able to hold it off. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, whatever, doesn't matter. But the assumptions were these, that this fort was filled with, coffers. The coffers were full. The grains were there. The money was there. There are no traitors, which might give a small alley for these people to come in from this. And that they're sort of very local knowledge, which these people do not know. So they might just go and siege, put up a siege, throw some weapons, which these impregnable walls will not, break upon. And these are the assumptions why Marathas, you can say, let the muddy waters be. This is the muddy water. And it will automatically get cleared out. They'll leave. Whenever they did not leave, like, in the case of Chava, it was because some traitor gave him up. So, abhi kya kiya hai na humne? When we fleshed out the assumptions by thinking critically, I've given you at least 5 point of views to think. So, most people who are even able to apply tasks on the face of it, they sometimes do not know how to sketch out the dimensions. Dimensions help you figure out the examples. Let's say this was an example. Now, you will put an example like this, and your reasoning for putting this example would be, you can let the muddy waters be, like in this case, provided that your backyard is full, provided that some of those assumptions, 1 or 2 or 3 of those 5 assumptions were met in this scenario. And if you have to give me an antithesis, you'll give me another such scenario where you can say that, I think there are so many cases where in British and Indian kings fought and someone betrayed or their fortification was not good. So they just assumed that they can put it in a stalemate. Indian kings just assumed that we'll have a long drawn stalemate and then Brits will go away. But little did they know that Brits are having treaties backdoor. And so it was a bad idea to keep the muddy waters be. Now, as you follow up with this line of reasoning and you develop your thesis and antithesis properly, you will realize that your synthesis would automatically come now. And the synthesis would be, usually the synthesis is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. How do I unite these two things? So synthesis would be something around, we need to take care of 5 assumptions. And even if you don't remember all 5, it's completely fine. Even if you remember 3, basically, however far you could think critically, the muscle which you need to develop right now, and don't wait for prelims for that, you would put that in a synthesis and say, given these conditions, a good leader, or we need to think through maturely and ensure that the muddy water is kept in bay if this is met with. Okay? This is the part which is the most important for you at this point of time to understand UPSC and its syllabus, not just essay, not just ethics, but even current affairs. Understand your assumptions. Check, are they holding ground? When you listen to, when you read a news on anything on IR and you see 2 countries, or maybe India versus something, China, and you see a news which is eulogizing India, check the assumption. Check the assumption that the pointers on which we probably have a stride today or a gain today, can they not be countered by China or USA in some later day? What are the assumptions on which we are celebrating these 3 things? Now, some of the assumptions could be true or could hold off for a long time, but some of the assumption might just fall the next month. And when you keep thinking like this, not just you develop a good critical thinking, but you also develop a really good hand at this thesis, antithesis, and synthesis framework. So if there's one thing that you need to take away from this video, regardless of whatever PYQ I discuss, it is check your assumptions. And you will get better at these assumptions by 3 things. 1, your GS knowledge. If you dig one step deeper, okay? Cold War बस इतना ऊपर पढ़ा है तो that's just facts. If you ask question why, what made it happen, what were the power systems, then you'll know this is the assumption. These 3 are the assumptions, or 5 are the assumptions, or sometimes there's just one assumption. Then you need to be able to think critically. So all the PYQs, and we do this in the essay classes, we'll do it as the cohort starts on 1st September. We'll go through the assumptions. And we'll check which assumption is the biggest one, priority-wise, which is the weak assumption. And third, try to get better at cross-questioning. Try to enhance your critical thinking, whatever example or whatever subject you read. Even if it's static, even if it's current affairs, even if it's ethics or your optionals, get better at understanding the undercurrents. You keep getting better at these things if you've been a good reader in your life as well. ये सब भी नहीं है, so just come to the class. Because this is how we teach. The pedagogy of mentorship when it comes to academics is critical thinking. Absolute hardcore critical thinking. Okay? And truth be told, our school systems and our college systems have messed up with that. We accept life in binaries, whereas life is anything but that. So the more shades of gray you're able to see in your life, between the 1s and the 0s, this is where all the assumption matrix comes, and you'll become a better person in life as well. Forget about essays and UPSC in general. And this whole padhai likhai would be so light for you. It'll be hard work, it'll be deliberate effort, very deliberate evolution, because you have to write the answers, but it'll be fun. Trust me, you have never, or rarely you would have experienced engaging with disciplines like this. And that's the promise of UPSC Essay. Okay? This is it. This is the muddy water best cleared by leaving it alone. We will write a whole 1200 exact essay elaboration, and we'll share the PDF within the Letter and Spirit group. That is for free, public, for everyone's use, so that you at least know one anchor to calibrate against. But if you can, join our Smash Mains cohort. Join it and you will find this theme recurring in almost every main subject. And doesn't matter if you're a beginner right now, doesn't matter if you have no GS knowledge. This critical thinking, this kind of systems thinking, and the books we suggest are exactly the thing you need to build in clearing this exam in the first attempt, for clearing this exam in the first attempt. So I hope to see most of you here. If not, enjoy the video, make notes, and do well. We'll see you in the next video with another PYQ, and we'll solve all the PYQs of 2025 in the order. Thank you.